Jamen, vi fortsætter.
So let's carry on.
Okay.
Vi afsluttede første del, da vi snakkede omkring værgemålet.
So we ended first part where we were talking about the guardianship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, in the break, I was actually able to like process a little bit of our previous conversation,
Mm.
and I thought of another way of responding to the question about that you asked about why would the U.S. do what it was doing with the rationale.
Mm-hmm.
And so another way of describing it is this: to articulate the rationale and the reasoning within the United States of why it does what it does. To me specifically, it requires an acknowledgement of the systemic conditions. And I know that in these processes, the emphasis is just on what happens to the individual personally, and so that's why I've been like hesitating in talking about systemic. But my case, my situation is poses an undermining of the systemic. So I'll describe it like this. I said before, the United States is basically a pirate ship. It's extracting benefits. And it's a divisive and oppressive methodology of social order for all people. It's unfair for all people. In me graduating from law school, I advocate for an independent sovereignty for people of African ancestry, addressing the historic enslavement and persecution of people of African ancestry. I advocate for the return of native land to native sovereignties, and so those are obviously very contrarian or different from convention and perceived as a threat to the social order. And so for me to advocate that, coming from the credentials that I have, but also not even that, me doing that in a very congenial and coalition, in a way of coalition building, meaning like I'm not divisive. I don't hate anybody. I don't espouse hate towards anybody. And so it's difficult to discredit what I advocate when I don't hate anybody. So that's another rationale. So rather than directly negating or challenging what I advocate, it's a matter of undermining my person itself and the platform upon which I communicate this. I also provide to you this. In the year prior, in my third year of law school, there was an attempt to directly address me, and that's one way. This is what happens. My third year of law school, I was basically beat down by the police, and locked up, and then charged with a federal felony assault, with a penalty of 25 years in federal prison. And this is again during my third year of law school. It was a very excessive and woeful action, but that's another example of the persecution that I experienced. Eventually, after I was also the president of the Black Law Student Association at Georgetown, and so being somewhat in a targeted position for that type of attention and action. Eventually, the charges are dropped after a considerable amount of tenuous argumentation. So, but it may be considered that on the part of, and this is speculation, and I'm mindful to articulate that, on the part of the United States, it may be perceived that the attempt of directly confronting me or challenging me through the law was unsuccessful, and so the methodology of going through the premise of medical science is another attempt of undermining or discrediting the perceived political dissidents that I communicate during that period.
Okay.
Can I register whether that's helpful? Does that answer the question any further better or effectively?
Ja, men jo, jeg har forstået.
I understand.
Okay.
I understand you.
Altså du henviser til det mere generelle og systemiske undertrykkelse, som sker i USA.
So you're referring to the general oppression made by the system in the States.
Right. So there's, I mean, obviously there's the enslavement of people of African ancestry and the continuing oppression that people of African ancestry experience, the acute and severe oppression. There's the effective genocide of the native brethren, native kinfolk of the land as well. And I have a knowledge of how it's done. I have a knowledge of the intricacies of how it's done. And for me to have that knowledge and then to speak with that authority in contrast or against it, again, it's very unsettling for the social order. And there are many people who do speak out against it. There are many advocates and leaders, and additionally, but many of the leaders tend to resort to kind of like exaggerated claims of people, the system being evil, or it's this very antagonistic methodology of claiming of doing protest, and so it's very polarizing, and so it may get a small amount of following, but in terms of mass kind of audience and cooperation, people say, oh, that's just a heretic or whatever else. For someone like myself, I call out the injustice as it is, but I don't hate the people who are doing it, because I can get into the spiritual elements of it as well, but I don't hate, and because of that, it's further difficult to argue against me or to disagree with me, and it's increasingly responsive from the mass of society, and I experienced that within the work that I referenced in terms of my work with the interfaith movement, and so that's increasingly a threat towards the preceding order, social order.
Udover det her forhold, hvor du bliver anklaget for noget, og anklagen blev frafaldet, eller sigtelsen blev frafaldet, har du så været retsforfulgt i USA?
So other than this charge, which was made against you and which was eventually dropped, have you been subject to any prosecution in the States?
Prosecution, in terms of like being put on trial? Okay, no, there hasn't been any other trial experience. There have been other charges. Again, it's a methodology of behavioral control and dissuading. So there have been other charges, if that's what you're asking. But in terms of prosecution, there's been an absence of any other prosecution or any other trial.
Okay. Og hvordan er du så blevet retsforfulgt, hvis ikke det er ved en rettergang?
So what were you prosecuted if it was not a trial?
Yeah, there's been no prosecution for the 20 years, because the methodology is going through the psychiatric means where the effective prosecution is from the psychiatrist, and then the punishment is the forced detainment. So it's, like I said, it's circumnavigating the legal system, and it's utilizing medical science as a methodology for behavioral control. So rather than being presented for a jury, having a case put in front of the public, and all the things that are some of the safeguards of civil society, like I said, habeas corpus, not being held. Anybody who's held, there has to be a charge against that person. A person can't just be arbitrarily held. And when a person is held, there has to be due process. The person has to be tried, given a lawyer, and additionally. So that's the legal system. But in the psychiatric system, all those things are not required. It's just a matter of a concern. We're concerned about what that person might do. And that's enough for a judge to issue a court order and have that person forcefully detained indefinitely. And if the person refuses to cooperate, that's grounds right there for imposing psychiatric medicine. And then that continues on again indefinitely until there's sufficient cooperation on the part of the subject. And so it's circumnavigating the requirements of the legal system and utilizing the psychiatric system as a methodology for behavioral control.
Okay. Hvad har myndighedernes officielle begrundelse været for tvangsindlæggelserne?
What were the authorities' official grounds for forcing you into hospitals?
Okay, the hospital again. Yeah.
Psychiatric ward.
I don't mean to be like, I'm not. It's just genuine.
Jeg skal nok prøve at huske det.
I will try and remember it.
Okay, sure. I'm okay. I'm patient. I'm not a problem with it, but I just, when I respond, I just can't respond with that. So that's
det er fair nok, fair. Så hvad har myndighedernes officielle begrundelse været på, at du har været tvangsindlagt på psykiatriske afdelinger?
So what was the official grounds made by the authorities to admit you to psychiatric ward?
Okay, so when we talk about authorities now, we're talking about not just the U.S. government, but now we're also talking about the doctors as well, because it's my detainment and the torture and the persecution that I experienced is by the authorities, quote unquote, or the authority conferred within within the psychiatric doctors, the medical doctors, and so I'll explain how the process works. Essentially, in my case, what happens is that I had, to be honest, like I had arguments with my family because my family wanted me to practice law. Yo, I had all this education, get a job, make money, just be happy, live life. And I say, no, I can't do that. And so they're like, no, do that. We spend a lot of money for you. Do that. And I say, no. So I had arguments with my family. Now, to be honest, again, there's a lot of pressure put on my family as well because the people who supported me were from around the community. And again, in that binary of us versus them, there's the implications of me being a political or being perceived as a political dissident don't only just apply to myself, but to the people around me who support me as well. And so there's a certain amount of pressure put on my family of saying, yo, make sure that he abides because otherwise it's trouble for a lot of people. And so because of that, amidst those pressures, eventually, as I'm informed, and again, this is what I learned after the fact, my more through consultation with other people, goes to a judge and communicates concerns from the arguments. And there was some type of consultation with a psychiatrist who never talked with me, or never interviewed me, never saw me or anything else like that. But based on the testimony of the psychiatrist and the judge issues the order for me to be detained. Then I was detained, and upon detainment, then that's the first occasion after I was humiliated, tortured, and locked in a gurney, strapped to a gurney, and forcibly drugged. It's only after all of that that the psychiatrist first begins to speak to me. So the diagnosis, quote unquote, or the charge against me, the psychiatric charge, because that's increasingly what it is, was psychosis, schizophrenia, and another version of schizophrenia, which is referred to as schizophreniform. And again, this is all done before even talking with me. So that in itself is an indication of the woefulness.
Så var det inden du blev indlagt, og inden du havde set en psykiater, at du fik de nævnte diagnoser?
So was that before you were taken to psychiatric ward, and before you were given these, before you spoke with the psychiatrist, that you were given this diagnosis?
Okay, yes. Effectively.
Okay.
The diagnosis was made before I spoke to a psychiatrist at all. Whether the diagnosis was formally made as a premise for issuing the court order, I'm uncertain. I know that there needs to be some type of psychiatric approval or sanction of a court order being made, but whether that coincides with also a diagnosis being formally made, I'm uncertain. But I do know that the diagnosis was communicated to me before even having an interview with the psychiatrist.
Okay. Skizofreni, og hvad mere?
Schizophrenia, psychosis, and schizophreniform. And
schizophreniform?
Schizophreniform, yeah. It's something. It's some type of like. It's coincides with schizophrenia, but it was just another term that was utilized. Schizophrenia. I don't know. Couldn't tell you the spelling specifically. It's similar to schizophrenia. I can also provide that in that first occasion of my detainment in the psych ward, I was actually solicited to select my diagnosis. I was given a psychiatric desk reference and solicited, hey, pick one you think is applicable to you. And I'm mindful of my second personalization. They solicited me to select a diagnosis that I thought was applicable to myself. And so I read I read the psychiatric desk reference of all the different psychiatric afflictions. I'm like, none of these apply to me. And a lot of the questions they ask about having thoughts of suicide, having thoughts of hurting people, thoughts of people out to get me. I abstain from having any of those of thoughts or concerns. And I can go into further detail about that process. But yeah, I was very angry because it was frustrating. But anyway, I'll stop.
Godt. Da Da du fik et pas udstedt, og da du udrejste fra USA, havde du så nogle problemer i den forbindelse?
When you had your passport issued and you used this passport to leave the United States, did you have any problems leaving the States?
Utilizing the U.S. passport. I'm just clarify. Did I have any? To phrase it another way, was I able to leave the United States with the U.S. passport without incident?
Ja, det er spørgsmålet.
Yes, that's the question.
That is correct.
Det er korrekt.
What is correct?
I'm able to leave the United States with the U.S. passport without incident.
Okay, godt. Og kunne du også få passet udstedt uden problemer?
And was it also possible to have the passport issued without any problems?
Are you talking about on this most recent occasion? Just a couple months ago? Or are you talking about initially?
Den kan vi starte med.
Yes, let's start with that one.
Okay. So the just me going to get a passport, U.S. passport, is problematic because it's effective coercion and persecution. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights allows for a person to leave a country, and so the fact of me being denied that ability is unlawful according to international law. So for me to be required to secure a U.S. passport in and of itself is problematic. Now there was a process to get that, and I was able to do that because what I do is, how I put it, the U.S. has a very strong interest of me being aligned with the U.S., and so it's very emphatic, or even enthusiastic, maybe somewhat inaccurate, but enthusiastic of me being part of the U.S. system, particularly according to U.S. terms. So the issuing of the U.S. passport is comparatively simple or straightforward, but it's the conditions surrounding it and the implications of it that are increasingly problematic and egregious.
Godt. Så du havde nogle udfordringer, er det du siger, med at få udstedt et pas?
So you did have some challenges in getting the passport issued.
I have challenges leaving the country without the passport.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the United States is very willing to it's like this. For myself, being a U.S. citizen is equating to being a slave of the United States. So that might be difficult for other people to perceive, but that's the actuality that I experience. And so the United States is very willing to confer citizenship to me and provide those type of credentials accordingly, because it's tantamount to being enslaved. So that's the thing. It's extremely challenging to do things in the United States without that.
Det kan være, det er mig, der ikke forstår det, men jeg kan simpelthen ikke greje, om du siger, at du havde problemer med pasudstedelsen eller ej.
So maybe I just don't understand this, but it's hard for me to understand and realize whether you had problems getting the passport, obtaining the passport.
The passport is provided comparatively straightforward, but the answer to the question is comparatively straightforward. I guess perhaps what I'm speaking to is I'm trying to discern, and that might be a little bit excessive, but I'm trying to discern like the intentionality of the question. So that I can just answer this question straightforward of like the passport is issued without incident.
Okay.
Well, I'll say this. I had to go through, effectively, to be honest, like I had to lie. I had to be dishonest in the process because, and I guess that's an honest answer to the question. The actual process, I had to get a birth certificate. I had to get I had no ID issued by the U.S. government, and so I had to accumulate the different credentials that are required for the U.S. passport. That includes a birth certificate, a state ID, There's the requirement of social security card, but I didn't require that because I found I had another credential to utilize for that. So I had to get all those things. Now to get all those things, I had to basically go back on my political stance of renouncing U.S. citizenship and additionally and avail myself to being called a hypocrite, meaningless, and everything else like that. So those might be just kind of like pish posh, existential kind of woes or whatever. But for somebody who's very much a man of principle, it is extremely difficult. So the process is very straightforward, and the United States provides it very expediently. But I had to go through that process of self-denial and personal existential affliction to complete the forms and additionally for the process just to get out. So effectively, there's a certain amount of dishonesty on my part in that process, and I'm not certain how much that is perceived as a difficulty, whatever else. But that was part of it.
Okay. Godt. Lige nu, verserer der nogle sager imod dig i enten det juridiske eller det psykiatriske regi?
So just now, are there any pending cases against you in the legal system as well as in the psychiatric system?
Pending cases in the psychiatric system. Well, to answer the question about the legal system, I'm unaware of there being any cases. I'm in communication with the U.S. Officials at the local and federal level, and it's appropriate for me to communicate this. For these past 20 years, what I actually do, like as a vocation, is, I mentioned before, spiritual diplomacy and spiritual teaching. I'm involved with the Parliament of the World's Religions, the United Religions Initiative, the North American Interfaith Network, locally in Ohio with the Heights Interfaith Council, as well as Interact Cleveland. So I'm in regular communication and cooperation with people in religious authority, but also government officials in addition. So whilst these things are happening to me, exactly in the circumstances of these things happening to me, I'm actually cooperating with the U.S. authorities locally and federally with religious leaders and congregations in additionally. And so there's very much a duality, because in the face-to-face interactions we were doing talks and conferences and additionally, but at the same time I'm continually susceptible to the afflictions amidst any excessive disagreement and additionally. And so I say that because I'm actually in rather comparatively favorable standing within U.S. authority and governments because I am a lawman, and so that's one of the reasons why things are avoided in the legal sphere and then things are done in the psychiatric sphere. So, and to answer the question about cases pending in the legal sphere, I'm unaware of that. I mentioned before there are other charges put to me in the past 20 years, but that's been part of the persecution. One such case, I was locked in local precinct in Cleveland Heights, the place of my previous residence, and charged with obstructing police business or something to that effect. And I was locked. I refused cooperation. Eventually, after a week, the police released me, and there was an absence of any follow-up in terms of a trial or anything else like that. But at the same time, there was things communicated to me about it being like an ambiguous threat of it eventually returning or something like that. So I have to answer the question. I'm aware of that happening. That was on the day of Obama's re-election. So that was 10 years ago. But since then, I've been informed of anything, any trial or any other charges. So again, that's the legal realm. In the psychiatric realm, I think we would have to define what does the case mean, because I to be honest, I have less, my expertise is in law rather than in the psychiatric field. So I'm uncertain how I would respond to what the psychiatrists have against me. There's conflicting opinions. Some kind of tote the line of the initial diagnoses. Some disagree with that as well. And so to speak on behalf or concerning the perspective of the psychiatric authorities is difficult for me to do, but I can endeavor as my best ability.
Okay. Og hvornår har du sidst været tvangsindlagt?
And when were you last admitted to hospital forcibly? Admitted to psychiatric ward forcibly?
So the most recent occasion is approximately 4 years ago.
Okay.
And I think it's appropriate for me to communicate the conditions what precipitates that. I basically have a disagreement with the management the managing agency of the building where I live in, and I basically have like a peace flag outside my window, and the agency was very disagreeable with that, and so amidst threats of the eviction, and additionally, eventually, as I'm informed, the agency on its own works with the city of Cleveland Heights to again issue a court order to have me forcibly detained. So that's an example of another entity outside of the police, outside of my MOR, or the quote unquote person put in guardianship, of another entity facilitating a forced detainment, circumnavigating the legal requirements of habeas corpus and due process, but just throwing me in a cycle for being disagreeable. And so that's also a dangerous precedent as well. But that was the most recent occasion, and then I was released a few weeks later, and there's an absence of in the past 4 years of any kind of effective lingering requirements or arrangements from that most recent detainment.
Okay.
Alright.
Har du nogle problemer, aktuelle problemer med grupper eller privatpersoner i USA?
Do you at this moment have any problems with any groups or individuals in the United States?
I'm interested in knowing what, if you could further specify what you mean by do I have any problems, the word problems, do I have any problems?
Ja. Har du nogle problemer med grupper eller privatpersoner i USA, som du ønsker beskyttelse for, og derfor søger asyl i Danmark?
Do you have problems with any groups or individuals in the states and against whom you wish to be protected?
Okay. All right. So the way I respond to that is by communicating that the nature of persecution within the United States is very sophisticated. And there are the occasions of outright attacks or physical violence. But by and large, the nature of the persecution is just a pervasive culture of adversarialness, of civil entities adversely competing with each other. And the consequences of that competition is poverty, being rendered homeless, being rendered without economic self-sufficiency, and that literally being on the street in the winter, which is effectively a death sentence. And then, so the way people deal with those conditions, it's extremely adversarial. The way people deal with those conditions is to connect with a group, an ethnic group or religious group or otherwise. And there's a effective pledge of allegiance with that particular group. Again, either ethnic, religious primarily. So there's that. And that's how a person is gains support in that competition, and avoids the very lethal consequences of the adversarial competition with each other. And if a person does not belong to such a group, an ethnic group, religious group predominantly, then that person is left to fend for themselves and is very much vulnerable to receiving the consequences of being rendered economically insolvent and additionally. So that being said, again, I'm mixed, and many of the groups that exist within U.S. society are very homogenous. It's a specific religious community, it's a specific ethnic community. I am precluded from pledging allegiance to any one particular group because that involves adversarially competing against another group that I also belong to. And so because of that, people like myself are rendered comparatively stateless in the domestic competition. And so there's a very severe susceptibility of the lethal consequences accordingly. So when you ask me about do I have any problems, I have no problem with any community, but that's not necessarily the most critical criteria or consideration. The consideration is whether I have alignment with any community that helps that makes that makes life viable within the conditions of society, and I'm precluded from answering that in the affirmative, meaning that I'm comparatively unaligned. I have many connections with many communities. I'm very diplomatic with what I do, but in terms of being substantially aligned with any one community or one group, I am without that, and because of that, I am extremely susceptible to the lethal consequences of such non-alignment, of such statelessness. And so that's the problem. It's increasingly the conditions and not being aligned with others, and the consequences of that non-alignment.
Okay. Godt. Jeg skal bare lige høre, du sagde, du udrejste i USA for cirka 2 måneder siden, og du indrejste i Danmark i slutningen af februar eller starten af marts. Er det korrekt forstået?
So I just need to make sure you said that you left the United States approximately 2 months ago, and you entered Denmark by the end of February or March. Is that correct?
So I left the U.S. about a month ago, about 5 weeks ago.
Okay.
And the rest is accurate, yes.
Okay, godt. Jeg havde bare skrevet 2 måneder, det ændrer jeg til 1 måned.
So I had just written 2 months.
Okay.
I will correct that to write 1 month.
Just the reason why you might say 2 months is because I was issued the passport 2 months ago, and so immediately upon being issued the passport, then I secured the airline travel to get here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just, I presume you're mindful that your monitor kind of goes over the edge of the desk. I imagine you're aware of that.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's one of those little orky things. Like I just don't want it to fall. So yeah. I'm saying like imagine you do that intentionally to have further room, but I'm just it's one of those little things that's a little bit off balance from me. I'm like I don't want it to fall.
Yeah. Okay. Is that better?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's just as long as you know best what your desk is, so I'm just making sure. That helps me that you know what you're aware of it.
Yeah. Thanks. Rejste du direkte til Danmark?
Did you travel directly to Denmark?
So the flight that I had connections in Toronto and then Frankfurt.
Okay.
Which is also appropriate because the U.S. passport was actually stamped in Deutschland, and then I guess I took effectively a domestic flight from Frankfurt to Copenhagen.
Mm-hmm. Godt. Er der jeg tror umiddelbart ikke, at jeg har flere spørgsmål. Er der noget, som du synes, vi ikke har snakket om, som du gerne vil?
So, just for now, I don't think I have any more questions to ask you. Is there anything you think we haven't talked about?
If I am able to read the opening statement, I would appreciate that.
Ja, kan vi aftale, at jeg ikke tager et referat af det så, men lægger en kopi på sagen?
So, if we can agree that I will not write a summary of that statement,
that's fine.
I'll just include it and file as a copy.
Okay.
Godt, jamen så kan du læse erklæringen op.
You can read it out if you
Mm-hmm.
want.
Okay. So in the statement, I reference a number of documents, but I can like hold off on the documents and just present them all together at the conclusion, if that's increasingly feasible.
Ja.
Right.
Okay.
So, peace and blessings to you. This is who I am and what I do. Documents 1 and 2. In simple and most accurate terms, I am Earth. My father's ancestors come from the sacred lands of Israel, Ethiopia, Igbo, Twi, Mesgoki, Celtic. My mother's ancestors come from the sacred lands of Sverige, Denmark, Israel, India. I am born and raised in the sacred land of Ohio, the territory of the native Wyandot Nation. I present here my birth certificate issued by the state of Ohio. 3. My morfar is born and raised in the sacred land of Denmark a century ago. I present here a family photograph with me and my morfar, document 4. And I present here a journal of my morfar's bicycle trip from Holbæk to India, which is document 5. I am Danish, and this is why I am here in Denmark today. I present here a photograph of my immediate family, my far, more, and brother and sister, document 6. The name of my far is Yochanan ben Yochanan, John William Womack. The name of my mor is Shir Bat Emmet, Carol Elin Wallen Womack. The name of my morfar is Emmet ben Yochanan, Frank Vilu Wallen. I am here before Danish Immigration Services of the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I solicit asylum in Denmark. I offer asylum to Denmark. Specifically, I solicit asylum from persecution committed by the United States and medical science. I offer asylum from persecution committed by adversarial foreigners. I'm here to present my individual case. It is important to recognize I represent numerous distinct constituencies who are observing this asylum process. This particularly includes Native, African Middle Passage, and mixed heritage peoples. My full name is Peter Frank Womack Johansson of Sisi. My proper name is Peter Johansson. My Hebrew name is Zuri ben Yochanan. My Muskogee name is Ngozi Hadjo. My spiritual name is Zuriji. I present here my preceding World Service Authority passport, my recent Cleveland Heights residential ID card, my membership documents from B'nai Yeshurun congregation, my credentials from American Indian Movement, and my ambassador certification from the Parliament of the World's Religions, documents 7 through 11. I present here a photograph of my farfar, document 12. Womack is the name of a slave master who previously claims ownership over my far. Peter Womack, Zuri ben Ephraim, nearly 200 years ago. It is inherited through 3 generations onto me. It is a continuing legacy of human enslavement. It is evidence of continuing persecution. When Danish Immigration Services utilizes the name Womack towards me, Danish Immigration Services is calling me a nigger. This is why when Danish Immigration Services issues to me the initial ID card with that name, I refuse the ID card. I present here reference to the initial ID card currently held in custody by Danish Immigration Services. I am a world citizen. I am not a citizen of the United States. I hold a World Service Authority passport. I exist within the national jurisdiction of the world, Earth. I present here reference to my current WSA passport currently held in custody by the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That's what you have a photograph of. I graduate with degrees in economics, a BA, management, MBA, and law, JD, completing studies within 6 universities on 3 continents. I present here my academic transcripts from Hampton University, Case Western Reserve University, University of Manchester in effect, Georgetown University, Howard University, and the University of the Western Cape in effect. Documents 13 through 16. Your patience and consideration are appreciated. And now I present my personal case. I begin in the middle. When I graduated law school 20 years ago, I refused the United States bar because the United States Constitution is classist, racist, and genocidal, citing in part Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 3, commonly referred to as the Three-Fifths Compromise. 3 months after my law school commencement ceremony, I am abducted, tortured, and lawfully detained by the joint agency of the United States government and medical science. This begins a 20-year duration of ongoing persecution of unlawful abduction, torture, detainment, and molestation by the agency of the United States government, medical science, and additional entities. This concludes my formal introductory statement. It is important for me to emphasize I love all people of the United States. I love all people of medical science. I love all people of Denmark. And I love all people of Earth and the universe. I'm dedicated to promote the well-being and happiness of all beings. I'm prepared to answer your questions truthfully and to the best of my ability.
Thank you. Må jeg se dokument 3 og 5?
Can I see document 3 and 5?
3 and 5. Ho-ho. Talks for listening.
Thank you. Og nummer 5, det var bare cykelturen, som jeg...
And document 5 was the
Journal.
The bicycle.
Jeg cyklede fra hvorfra til du?
Where did he bicycle from?
From Holbæk
Holbæk.
to India.
Okay.
The ambition was to go around the earth, but his traveling partner got sick in India, and so they had to seek treatment and the only people who speak Danish in India were missionaries. And so when he was in Denmark getting his friend getting treatment, the missionaries shared with him the Gospels, and he becomes Christian. He grew up agnostic up to that point. So then he gets inspired. He becomes Christian in India, and he stays in India, becomes a missionary himself, where he meets my Mormor, who comes from North Dakota. And so they marry in India, and that's where my Mor is born, in India, and her two sisters. So they eventually move back to the U.S. in the Pacific Northwest and settle in the area of Seattle. And so that's the general he has of the communications that he has with people along his bicycle trip from Denmark.
Hvad lavede din mormor i Indien? Var det din mormor, der var i Indien?
What was it? Your maternal grandmother in India? What was she doing?
So okay, she was born and raised in North Dakota. Her ancestry comes from Sweden. Her parents were immigrants from Sweden, from Serbia, and so she goes to after she graduates from university, she decides to go to India as a missionary, and so that was her purpose for traveling to India. And then when she's there doing that work, that's when she meets my morfar.
Okay. Nå, er det noget, han har udgivet, den her?
Did he publish this?
Only with family members. It's
Okay.
it's a family document.
Men den er meget, meget sjov her.
It's a nice thing to have.
Yeah.
Ja.
Top.
Må jeg tage en kopi af din fødselsattest?
Can I make a copy of your birth certificate?
You're welcome to do so.
Okay. Godt, jamen jeg tænker, at vi har været igennem det meste, så nu vil jeg printe referatet, så vil Torben læse op for dig.
So I think we've been through most of it. So I'll print the summary and then the interpreter will read it out to you.
Okay.
Skal jeg lægge en kopi af erklæringen på sagen også? Det er op til dig, tænker jeg.
Do you want me to enclose a copy of the declaration?
Of the statement that I made, I would like to. I have a copy that you're welcome to keep.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what I was sorting out right here. Is just there. I have some. I sent an email before that has additional details of some of the anecdotes in those 20 years. With further detail. I'm uncertain if anyone in Immigration Services receives that, but I wrote it out because the printing in the facility here is somewhat tenuous, so I wrote a copy of that here. So these are for you to keep. You can hold on to that. So I'll give that to you.
Og jeg lægger dem på sagen på sagen elektronisk, og så vil vi jo så makulere de her dokumenter efterfølgende, medmindre du vil have dem tilbage.
So I will include these documents electronically.
Okay.
And then after that I'll maculate them unless you want them back.
You said you'll meticulate them, or?
Maculate them, destroy them. We will destroy them.
Er det kopier, det her?
Are these copies?
They're copies that are variable, but if you're going to destroy them, I would rather retain them myself. I wrote those out very diligently. No, I appreciate
I'm
it.
asking
If
if
you,
there are copies.
yeah. If you, I mean, I can go without it. It's not a big deal. But if you're able to like if you're just gonna like make a scan of it, and then if you can return it to me, I would appreciate that. But yeah, as opposed to it being destroyed. So yeah, that just seems so.
Men det er derfor, jeg spørger.
This is why I'm asking you.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that. I would appreciate that. Yeah. Tak.
Ja. Er det sprog, vi kender til? Hvad er det her skrevet på?
So, in which language is this written?
Haha, the earth, and that's part of who I am. I can tell you specifically. It's a lot of languages. It's Hebrew. It's Sanskrit. It's Gujarati. It is Arabic. It is Latin. It is Gurbani. It is Muskogee and Inuit. There's even Amharic from Ethiopia. There's additional on it as well. But yeah, it's a compilation of. To be honest, what that is like a recitation of like the core teachings of the traditions of each of those languages, and so it's on one page.
Okay, så jeg tænker, det er ikke noget, vi kan sende til oversættelse her i Danmark.
So I reckon that we can more send this document to for translation here in Denmark.
Well, that's why I'm here to help in that ability. But yeah, it would take a lot. There are religious communities from each of those languages here in Copenhagen as well. That's what I find in my research. But it would take a lot of doing, that's one of my jobs.
Godt. Jeg tager en kopi af det her, de her dokumenter, så
these
får dem tilbage.
documents and then I will return them.
Okay. So all the other documents that I have here that I recited in the statement, if there's any that you have an interest in photocopying, there's amenability, but it's up to you. I don't have a copy that I can give. These are all originals, so.
Jamen det er fint, dem beholder vi bare, med mindre vi
So that's fine, you just keep them unless we ask for them.
Okay.
Jeg skimmer lige hurtigt referatet. Giv mig lige 1 minut, og så printer jeg.
Just give me 1 minute. I'm just going to go through
Sure,
the
sure.
summary and then I'll print it.
I starten af samtalen snakker vi om ID-dokumenter.
So at the beginning of this interview, we talked about identification documents.
Og du oplyste, at du havde ikke nogen.
And you said you didn't have any.
Identification documents.
Og ja.
You said issued by the United States.
Ja. Straight up.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I guess that's
Så det er bare lige for at sige, jeg sletter bare det afsnit, hvor jeg har skrevet, at du ikke har nogen ID-dokumenter, fordi nu har du fremlagt et ID-dokument.
So this is just to tell you, I will delete the paragraph in which you say that you do not have any identification documents, because this is one.
Yeah, I would advise not to delete it because I did say that. So it's on the record. I can explain like why I said that. But I don't think it should be deleted because it's the actual. I did say that, so it's appropriate to include it. I think.
Okay. Ja, men så hvad skal jeg bemærke noget til?
So do you want me to make a comment?
Do you want me to make, or do you? Yeah, you can like qualify it as. I could just say when you said an ID, I was thinking of like a photo ID, like a passport or a state ID or something to that effect. I recognize how a birth certificate is very much can be categorized as an ID issued by the state of Ohio, or by the United States. So that can be perceived as an inaccurate response. I didn't intend to be deceitful in that respect. But I also share that as increasingly in an existential way. But yeah. Without getting too complicated, you're welcome to receive it or communicate whatever other additional comment you feel appropriate along those lines.
Godt. Jeg får lige printet.
So I'm just gonna print it.
Godt. Det var fra. Det skal være på begge sider.
Ja.
Okay, så du får læst referatet op
So
nu.
now the summary will be read out to you.
Og du kan jo komme med dine bemærkninger, hvis der er noget, jeg har
So you
misforstået.
can make your comments as we go along, and you can also say if there are misunderstandings.
Så vi kan lige tage det løbende, hvis der er noget.
So just if you have any comments or corrections, you just tell me as we go along. So you entered this country approximately 1 month ago, and you applied for asylum on the 7th of March 2022. Your name, Peter Frank Womack Johannesson OCC, and you were born on the 29th of August 1974, and you are from the USA. And you, as for your religion, you say that your religion is earth. Your mother tongue is English, and you do read and write in your mother tongue. You also speak Spanish, Mandarin, Hindu, French, Hebrew. And you were born in Ohio. You do not bring any family with you. You have in your home country your parents, 4 siblings, as well as your wife. Outside Denmark, you do not have any family, and you don't have any family living in Denmark. You're married, you don't have any children, you have not served in the military, your state of health is fine, you have not submitted a passport. As for identification documents, you submit a birth certificate, which is included as a copy in the file. You do not submit any other documents. As for your name and date of birth, you wish to have your name changed from Peter Frank Womack to Peter Frank Womack Johannesson OCC, in accordance with the World Government Passport submitted. You state that your date of birth, regarding your date of birth, you state that you're working with 12 calendars, but it is the 29th of August 1974 according to the Georgian calendar. And you say you were then informed that this change of data will be made. You were born in Ohio, where you also grew up, and you still have your mom as well as 4 siblings, as well as distant family members in the States. You say that you're married, but you do not wish to give more information about this relationship because of security reasons. You say that you have family in Denmark, consisting of cousins. You were educated within economics, art, and law, and you've worked within spiritual diplomacy and teaching. And you also lived in England and South Africa during your education, or in order to further your education. When you ask, you said you do not have any identification documents. You only have the world government passport, which you submitted. You're commenting after having submitted a birth certificate that you do not consider a birth certificate being an identification document because among other things, it does not have a photo. As for your state of health, you say that you do not suffer from any physical diseases, and apart from suffering from ego problems, like everybody else, you do not have any mental problems. You're adding that you do have articulation pains, but this is probably because of age. You left your country. Your travel route and your stay here in Europe. You left your country approximately 1 month ago. You're not known in the Eurodac system, and as for visa, you entered on a valid biometric and national passport, which was issued on the 1st of May 2010. Oh, sorry, it was issued after the 1st of May 2010.
Okay.
And you say that you left and you went to Denmark. You left your country and went to Denmark using a passport which was issued by the American authorities approximately 2 months ago. When you entered Denmark, you submitted this, you returned this to the American embassy because you do not acknowledge your American citizenship. You do not acknowledge this because of the systematic racism in the American society, including the educational system. You previously traveled. When you previously traveled, you were using a passport for your journeys to England and South Africa. You're saying that in 2004 you renounced your American citizenship. You have no documentation showing this, but you can send it subsequently. And then you ask if you're still an American citizen, considering that in 2022 a passport was issued. You say that you will not speak on behalf of the American authorities, but you do not acknowledge the legitimacy in their decisions. Then you ask you ask whether you have a residence permit in other countries, and you say that you believe being a citizen of the world and thus of all countries because you do not acknowledge the conventional division of borders. You left the United States approximately 1 month ago and entered Denmark with transits in the end of February or the beginning of March. But you had to stay at a friend's place near Frederiksholm for 2 weeks because of quarantine, because you've not received corona vaccination. Conflicts in your home country. If you return to the States, you're afraid of being subjected to abuse or infringement by the authorities of the States. You're saying that you are a mixed ancestry, including Ghana, Ethiopia, Ireland, Sweden, Denmark, Indian, etc. And this is your background. Your paternal grandfather was born and grew up in Denmark, which is why you chose to go to Denmark. You're saying that after the attack of World Trade Towers in 2001, you refused to take your lawyer legal bar, your lawyer bar, because you did not accept the consideration that you're either with or against them. Because of that, you were detained forcibly and admitted to a psychiatric ward. In that connection, you were subjected to a treatment which was not dignified. You were your clothes were taken away, and you were forced, and medicine was forced in you, and urine was also taken forcibly. Urine sample was taken forcibly. You were admitted forcibly for a month before you were discharged. For the following 20 years, this has happened 10 to 12 times with a varying degree of torture. And you asked about the reasons for these admissions, forcible admissions and forcible medication. You said that you did get the reasons, but they are not true. You assume that you were admitted because that was the way of the authorities to take away your dignity, as it has happened in various countries throughout the time.
Jeg tror, der står troværdighed. Har jeg skrevet anstændighed?
Ja, det har du skrevet, ja. This, sorry, it's not dignity, it's trustworthiness. As it has happened in various countries throughout the times. You were asked which statements and acts the authorities would discount, and you say that you refusing to take part in the mass history which took place after the attack in 2001. You were requested to specify what you did not want to participate in, and you said that you could give metaphors based on the American tribal culture, and you were requested to specify, and you then answered that you were educated jurist, and outside the system you receive esteem, but this makes it more undermining for the system and this is why it makes it more undermining for the system when you refuse to be part of the game.
Undskyld.
Ja.
Altså bandekultur, ikke også?
Ja, undskyld, ja. So sorry, that's a correction. You say that you can give metaphors based on the American gang culture. Then you ask what you do not want to take part in. You say it's difficult to specify this, but an example could be a person rises in the grades within an organization, and then you don't want to be part of it anymore, and this is considered a threat. You asked if you were ever subjected to abuse, infringement committed by the American authorities other than the forcible admissions and medication given to you. As stated by you, you say that you have, and these admissions only serve as controlling you, and that you had to live under this control. In 2004, you were appointed a guardian against your will by a court, and the person who was appointed was your mom. You do not acknowledge being under guardianship because you do not acknowledge this being legal. You add that during 3 years of law studies, during your 3 years of law studies, you were attacked by officers and exposed to violence and charges which could lead to 25 years of imprisonment. But these charges were withdrawn, however. You're adding that the United States continues to oppress Afro-Americans and the original population. You are asked whether you've been prosecuted other than this incident. When the charge was withdrawn, you say that you've not been prosecuted in court. Then you ask in which other ways you've been prosecuted, and you say that other than the forcible admissions, which had the intention to control you. Because in the legal system you cannot oppress, it was not possible to oppress you, then they chose to oppress you through the psychiatric system, because there's not the same requirements for the procedure. As for the official grounds regarding your admissions, you say that it is only the system, but it is not only the system but also the individual doctors. Your family was against you not using your education, which was expensive, and also there was a pressure from the people around you and your family. This made her approach the court, and the judge decided in that connection that you were to be admitted forcibly. Since then, you've not been examined or evaluated by a psychiatrist. You were, however, before that the evaluation was made, diagnosed with schizophrenia, psychosis, and schizophrenia form. You assume that this diagnosis or a previous evaluation must have been submitted to the court in order to have you admitted. You were asked if you had any problems in having your passport issued or leaving the United States, and you say that you did not have any problems leaving the country. Then you ask if you had any problems when the passport was issued, or if you had any problems in having the passport issued. You say that the right to leave the country is a secured right. You ask if you had any problems in having the passport issued. You said that you did not have any problems in having the passport issued. You are adding that you don't agree with the process, but the issue of the passport was a requirement in order to be able to travel. And then you ask if there are any present cases pending against you within the legal or the psychiatric system. You're saying that you're not familiar with any cases in the legal system, but you have such a position as a jurist that this is also difficult for the authorities. You ask if there are any pending cases in the psychiatric system. You say that this depends on the notion cases. Then you ask when you were last admitted forcibly. You say that this is around 4 years ago, and you're admitting that prior to this admission there was a disagreement with your landlord, because you had a peace flag hanging outside your window. The landlord made the police detain you and admit you forcibly. You were discharged approximately 2 weeks later. Then you ask if you've had any problems with groupings, or individuals. You say that depends on the notion problems. You asked you ask if you're applying for asylum due to the problems with the groupings or individuals. You say that the system in the States forces people to compete about the resources, which leads to poverty and homelessness. It also leads to the creation of groups within ethnicity and religion. If you do not belong to any of these groups, you are more vulnerable. You are of a mixed ancestry, and therefore you do not belong to any specific group, because then you would indirectly be competing with other people with whom you are a part of, with whom you are partly a part of, with whom you are partly part of. You're adding that you do not have problems with any environments, any communities, and that you're very diplomatic and you have dialogues with many groups. You ask if you have any comments before the translation. You say that you do wish to read out a declaration which you have prepared. You submit birth certificate, 2 documents in English, as well as a document which is written in the language Earth.
Ja, det var det. Nogle bemærkninger?
Do you have any comments?
So overall, in general, it's very proximate. There are certain nuances of how things are articulated and framed that I consider to be increasingly inaccurate. But I don't want to I think it's unnecessary to be what's called picky-unish about those articulations. What I consider is appropriate for me to say is in very plain terms. The United States is a foreign occupying entity. It is illegal. It is criminal. Plain and simple. I refuse participating in that illegal criminal activity. Plain and simple. The way the summary is articulated contextualizes me as a dissident towards a presumed legitimacy of United States governance, and that is not an accurate depiction. It is appropriate to recognize that the U.S. is a foreign, illegal, criminal entity, because otherwise, anyone who doesn't recognize that is availing oneself to the same experience of foreign, illegal, criminal activity. So that's why I say that. I am the law. I am law. So I am not a dissident. I am not an antagonist. I am the protagonist. I am a protagonist. And the foundation, the premise of my protagonism is the earth. I am very studied, learned, and practiced in the law of the earth. And the United States is violating that law. So I'm just saying that for the record, for the information, because that changes the way the summary is articulated. I am not the dissident. I am not the outlaw. The United States is the outlaw, and it's appropriate to recognize that. So any other the details regarding the summary are appropriately adjusted with that recognition. So it seems unnecessary for me to pinpoint all the different issues or whatever. The one thing I will say is the reason for me not taking the bar is it has very little to do with the 11th of September. It is because of what I stated specifically. Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 3 of the United States Constitution, the 3/5 compromise. That is the reason. It's not a response to conditions that I experience at any certain point. It is a refusal of participating in the foreign, illegal, criminal nature and activity of the United States. That is the reason why I don't take the bar. And yes, it specifically pertains to the treatment and persecution of Native people, which is appropriate, not the original inhabitants, but the Native people. And then also the persecution of people of African ancestry, but the persecution of all peoples. It's not just Natives and Black folk that are experiencing oppression. All peoples are experiencing oppression. I refuse participating in that foreign illegal criminal activity. Um, and also, when it comes to the experiences that I have in lockup, I think it's somewhat of a very innocuous and benign articulation of what I actually experienced, because it wasn't the removal of clothing, it wasn't just the extraction of urine. It was intentional, humiliating. I was strapped to a gurney, and the clothes were torn off of me in front of numerous people. People were dancing and singing during this process. So it wasn't just a medical procedure in a hospital of removing urine to test for drug intoxication or anything. It was intentional humiliation and subjugation, dehumanization, for the purpose of subjugation and behavioral control. And that was a nice version. It gets worse than that. And on another occasion, when I was forcibly detained and I refused to take the drugs voluntarily, the same scenario happened. The orderlies and I was injected with what I refer to as a hot shot of Geodon. And in the hot shot of Geodon, it is presumably included with some type of sedative where if you've ever tried to hold your breath, and at some point it becomes too intolerable to continue holding your breath, and eventually one has to let go because there's this increasing sense of disease. With this hot shot of Geodon, I call it chemical waterboarding, because it's like suffocating, and it's just increasing disease until there's no remedy, there's no relief. It's just continual suffocation and to the point of passing out. That is torture. It is waterboarding. And so it's not a benign medical treatment that happens in a hospital, which is why I don't articulate in that sense. It is intentional torture in the interest of behavioral control, subjugation, and dehumanization. And it repeatedly happens. And when it doesn't happen, there's always the threat of it happening. If anything I do is perceived as disobedient or dissavory. And so it's appropriate to articulate that to understand the nature of the persecution.
All right. I wrote a comment about that.
That is appreciated.
Jeg printer lige en ny.
So I'll print a new one with the addition.
There's other examples too that I can get, like increasing graphic and
I get the point.
I trust it. Okay.
Jeg skulle også lade sig at kopiere det her.
Skal jeg hjælpe dig med det, Anders?
Ja, det må du gerne. Det er begge sider, bemærk det.
Kan du have den her samlet og den for dig, ikke?
Men jeg tænker 3. Den her, fordi ja, den hedder 1-9, den der. Og den her er ikke nummereret.
Nej, den er også samlet.
Og det her er på et andet sprog.
Yes. Jeg kan også lige, hvis du printer den ud, så skal du komme ned.
Jeg har printet. Jeg har sat det på. Ja. Der er også et NP-brev derude, og en indkaldelse til samtale. Det ligger formentlig...
Og alle sammen, ikke?
Jo.
Ja.
I can decode something for you if you like. Whilst we're waiting here, we can just sit here and
I
quiet.
don't have it anymore.
Yeah, that's okay.
My colleague took it to make a copy.
It's a technique that I learned.
Who taught you this language?
Many teachers.
Okay.
There's not one person to go to. There's not a university that has a program that provides it. So I've spent 20 years of study and I've gone to conferences. I've met teachers from different traditions, and so it's been a very for the past 20 years, I've basically been locked up in a hole and studied, and that's what I've done. And I make correspondences. So that's what I've learned is the accumulation. And so I've reached a point of like being increasingly absorbed within it, so that I can share it in an increasingly personable way. But it's been through a very significant process of study and practice. But one thing I'll share, like in the beginning stages, like I said, I was young and I got angry when this happened, and I recognized that when I got angry, it was just used against me. Anything I did that seemed like hostile, we just see what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about. So then I had to learn to get patience, and I learned that patience through the teachings of like how to respond to the injustices in a compassionate and loving way, in an honest way, because the teachings, like Jesus, and additionally, are experiences of persecution and then healing is the other term that I have as well. And so these are very profound lessons that I study and I learn amidst experiencing the persecution. So one of the things it's tenacious, and I know my experience in Denmark is I've shared that I've noticed the intelligence, the level of intelligence, people very quick with the wheels. And so mindfulness, the psychology is I notice very strong. One of the challenges is having a serenity of mindfulness, a quiet of mind. And so mantras and meditation are our technique of doing that. And so one of the mantras includes a list of principles from traditions that help calm oneself amidst the challenging conditions. So yeah. I'll share one mantra. It's 11 principles that are shared by many different traditions, but they're articulated by different traditions. It's very simple. It's Ahimsa Ubuntu Veritas Haya Shumagahuga Samadhi Shema Shabon and Rab. And I do it in a sing-songy type of way. And I do this throughout the day. And so when I've been taken to lockup and I've been locked in the paramedics and the paramedics are talking with me and everything, I share with them this because I'm saying that whilst I'm being locked up and everything else like that. And so when things get calmed down and they start listening to me, I have a conversation with them and I explain to them and I tell them stories about each of those principles that they relate to, that they know from. And so again, it helps calm myself, it helps calm others around me, but it helps also just the mindfulness. And so we each have different mantras, teachings. The Beatitudes I recite on a regular basis as a way of calming and centering and cultivating the patience. And so that's just one of them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Alright. Det her, det er bemærkningerne.
These are the comments.
Så det her, det er det referat, som du har fået læst op. Og det her, det er så det, jeg har
summary
skrevet
which
til.
was read out to you already, and this is what I've added.
Okay.
So you're commenting that there are some things that are not accurate in the summary, but you don't see any reason to go into detail about that. So you're commenting that you do not acknowledge the United States and that it's a criminal organ and that you are not a dissident, but you are against the United States.
So, okay. I'll say it like this. If you can quote, if the intention is just to quote what I'm saying, it's appropriate. So this is the first thing. Just plain and simple. The United States is a foreign, illegal, and criminal entity. Full stop. Now, you might disagree with that statement, but that's what I'm saying.
No, it's not because I disagree. It's just I kind of wrote that.
Why? Okay. You can say that. I say that. You can qualify it in that respect. But the reason why I say that because if without that, I'm contextualized as the dissident, as the antagonist, and so that's why I disagree with that. And then when it says when the summary says that I'm not an antagonist, but I'm not against the United States per se. I am the law. I am the protagonist. I am dedicated and committed towards promoting the well-being of all people of the earth.
Men jeg tror faktisk ikke, jeg har skrevet imod USA, men jeg har skrevet, at dissident,
Okay,
USA
right,
dissident.
yeah. So it says here that you, I repeat it, you're commenting that you do not acknowledge the United States.
You're right. I just want to pause that one
it
statement.
It is a criminal organ and that you are not the dissident, but the United States is.
Okay. So.
Would you like me to change that?
Yeah, I would. Because here's
the short version, please.
Okay. The statement of saying, I do not acknowledge the United States is based upon the presumption that the United States is to be acknowledged. And I disagree with that premise. I'm saying at the very beginning, the United States is a foreign, illegal, criminal entity. I am the law. I represent the justice. And so my refusal of cooperating with the United States is the refusal of participating in the foreign, illegal, criminal activity.
Okay, let me continue. So you're commenting that the attack of the 11th of September is not the determined reason for not taking your bar, but it is the reason is the oppressing system.
Again, I want to be specific. The U.S. Constitution. I mean, it's important to recognize it. It's the U.S. Constitution. Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 3, the 3/5 compromise. It's not an ambiguous just wailing against the machine. It's a specific citation of the nature of the illegality and the criminality of the United States methodology.
Godt, så jeg tilføjer det undertrykkende system herunder forfatningen.
So I will write here the oppression system, including the Constitution.
Okay.
Men som der blev som det fremgik af vejledningen, så kan jeg jo ikke tage et ordret referat.
So
Jeg bliver
as
nødt til
it was
at
mentioned in the guidelines, I
opsummere
cannot write word for word your
I hear you.
statement. It's a summary.
Right, but my concern is this: if you just make a general statement about like the system, I've experienced 20 years of this. It lends itself towards being accused of just being a conspiracy theorist or some just heretic that just indiscriminately just has malaise against the system, and it doesn't reflect the amount of study and understanding of how things work. Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 3 of the U.S. Constitution. It's important for that to be included as a reason why I communicate what I communicate. It's not a general kind of feeling or just angst. It's a specific citation of the criminal charges.
Hvilken bestemmelse var det igen?
So which constitution, which article was it?
Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 3, commonly referred to as the 3/5 compromise. I can explain what that is.
Nej, jeg tror vi...
I think it's fine.
Okay.
Ja, jeg tror det er fint.
So you're commenting that the description of your forcible admissions is described in a way which is too simple. The whole episode was intended to oppress and humiliate and control you, including subjected to medicine, controlling you
Torture.
through medicine.
It's not medicine, it's torture. Medicine is voluntary, it's treatment. Jesus didn't go around and lock people up and strap them down. He healed them. It was voluntary. They asked for it. When somebody comes in and says, let me do it for you, and straps them down and forcefully, it's not medicine. It's not healing. It's torture.
Jeg ændrer det til medicinsk tortur.
And
So I will
that's...
change it to say torture through medicine.
Part of the difficulty of recognizing it is the exact intentionality of that methodology. Because people have difficulty recognizing it. If I say it's a policeman doing it, or whatever, people say, oh yeah, because there's. But if it's a doctor that's doing it, people have difficulty recognizing it, and that's exactly why it's the doctors that are doing it.
Så kan jeg skrive ulovlig medicinsk tortur.
So can I write here torture through illegal drugs?
Nej.
Or through illegal, through giving you the drugs illegally?
That I'm agreeable with that statement.
Okay. Godt, det var den sidste bemærkning.
So I think that was the last comment.
Jeg printer en ny, og så
Så
får du
print a
lige
new one,
bemærkningerne læst op igen.
And it will be read out to you again.
Jeg henter den.
Okay, tak.
Tak. Alt er scannet ind, men den ene kom bare for sig, fordi jeg var lidt i tvivl, det der oversættelse.
Okay, har du scannet den ind til dig selv?
Nej, til dig.
Nå, til mig, okay, ja.
Yes,
Super.
ja.
I also communicated, just as a side note, when I had the interview with the nurse with Red Cross as part of the mission into the center, she also immediately acknowledged that history, that tendency, even within Denmark, of forced imposition of psychiatric methodologies to people is a methodology of behavior control. So I just share that whatever benefit it may provide.
Okay. So you're commenting that the United States is a foreign, illegitimate criminal organ, and that you are not the dissident. And you're commenting that the attack, which occurred on the 11th of September, is not the determined reason for not taking the bar, but it is the oppressive system, including the Constitution. And you make reference to Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 3 of the Constitution. You're commenting that the description of your forcible admissions is described in a way which is too simple. The whole episode was intended to oppress, humiliate, and control, including illegal administration of drug. Including illegal drug torture.
Er du okay?
Are you okay?
I'm just having flashbacks.
Okay. You can just have a minute if you wish.
You go ahead.
Ja, skal jeg læse det andet, altså efter om at
Ja,
han er orienteret om?
Jeg kan bare lige en indledende bemærkning måske.
Okay.
Det er sådan, at når man søger asyl i Danmark som amerikanske eller personer, som vi vurderer at være amerikanske statsborgere, så bliver asylsagen behandlet i en hasteprocedure.
So when we process applications for asylum made by people we consider being American citizens, they are being processed, these applications are being processed according to a specific rapid procedure.
Og i den forbindelse så vil du blive indkaldt til en samtale med Dansk Flygtningehjælp.
And in that context, you will be called for an interview with Danish Refugee Council.
Den samtale finder sted på torsdag om 2 dage kl. 9 om morgenen i København.
And that interview will be on Thursday at 9 o'clock in Copenhagen.
Det er vigtigt, at du giver møde til den samtale, og ellers så kan der blive truffet afgørelse i sagen på det foreliggende grundlag.
And it's important that you do appear for that interview, because otherwise a decision may be made based on the available information.
Har du spørgsmål
Do you have any
de
questions
oplysninger?
regarding this information?
So it sounds like there's an appointment that's already made for Thursday.
Korrekt.
Yes.
Okay.
that's
Is there an
correct.
hour for that?
Ja, det passer nok med.
It's at 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. Okay.
Nå, undskyld,
Ja.
jeg troede, om der var afsat en times tid til
I
samtalen.
thought you meant whether it was an hour's interview, and it might last an hour.
I mean, just like the time. That's what I mean by hour. So it's 9 o'clock
Yeah,
a.m.
yeah.
Okay. And then how am I supposed to get there?
Du får billet til transporten, offentlig transport og en rejsevejledning ved porten Røde Kors.
So you will get a ticket to travel by public transportation, and then you will also get instructions how to get there.
Okay.
And you get this at the gate.
Yes, correct.
So I go to the gate on the day of my travel there, or should I go to the gate beforehand to receive that
The day before.
the day before? And then also the ID card. I returned the initial one, and so I have yet to be issued another card with the name that I go by, that I utilize.
Ja. Ja, okay. Det har du ikke fået endnu. Men du...
Jeg tror, det er for at få et nyt kort.
Ja, for at få et nyt, ja, med det fulde navn.
Ja, med det her.
Kan vi aftale, at når vi er færdige med samtalen, så går jeg ned og beder dem om at udstede det kort, og så kan du måske komme tilbage ved en, lad os sige, en 3-4-tiden og få afhentet det.
So once we finish this interview, I can go down and speak with them and ask them to issue a new card, and then you can come back like 3 or 4 to pick it up.
Jeg ved ikke, om de er færdige med det der, men hvis ikke de er, så må du komme tilbage i morgen, tænker jeg, og lige høre, om det er færdigt. Jeg skal nok sige ned til vagterne, at vi har lavet den aftale.
So I don't know if they will have the card ready by that time, but in case they do not, then you'll have to come back tomorrow to pick it up. But I will tell them that this is an arrangement we made.
Okay.
Godt. Bemærkningerne, er de tilfredsstillende nu?
Are you satisfied with the
I'm amenable with signing what I have to sign.
Okay. Godt. Så må du gerne underskrive.
then you are requested to sign?
So if I understand correctly, I'm supposed to sign each page. Is that?
Vil du have det herovre? Det bliver rodet sammen.
Ja.
Her derinde.
Så det er begge ting, der skal ud, ikke?
Og det her skal jeg også ud.
Do you want me to sign front and back, or just one page is sufficient? Front and back. Front and back.
Godt, så skal vi have udleder diverse indkøb. Would you like a copy of the summary?
Actually, I would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Er det den nye, det her? Ja. Kunne jeg ikke... Nå, okay, kig der.
Skal
Du har aldrig taget så mange kopier.
Skal jeg gøre det igen?
Det må vi gerne.
Er du sikker på, at du
Hvis
ikke
du tilbyder det.
Peter? Altså, du vil underskrive der?
Could you sign here on the line?
Maybe. I'll be back in 1 second.
Godt. This is about the interview
Okay.
and the address and the date and time.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm taking the train,
Yeah, the
To-
public
public transportation, and that'll take me to the main the train station in Copenhagen.
Yeah.
Copenhagen. And then what is the most prudent methodology of transport once in that? Is it just taking the metro to a nearby stop here?
Yeah, I would guess so. Yeah.
Okay.
So the bus to the Allerød train station, and then to the
Okay.
central station.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think a metro.
And the same ticket that I can utilize for the train to get to Copenhagen is I can utilize on the metro to get to this stop as well.
Yeah, it's in zones, so I guess it's just for all
Okay.
zones here in
Okay.
Zealand.
Okay.
But they do it almost daily, I guess. So they know
Okay.
what to issue to you.
And also like in terms of like duration, any idea like how much I should plan ahead, like what time I should leave here to prepare for that? 7 a.m. or something?
Yeah, I would guess so. 6:30, 7.
Okay. Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if it takes a few hours to get there.
Okay.
But
A few hours to get there.
yeah,
Okay.
I would guess so. But go ask the
Information
Cross,
desk.
tomorrow.
Sure.
And also this one. About we are going to process your case in Denmark,
Okay.
and you can read it in the English, and the first page is in Danish. It's a formality that we are going to process your case in Denmark. You won't be sent to another European country.
Okay. And you want me to sign this? Yeah.
No, it's
No,
just for you.
oh,
It's a
okay.
decision that we're going to process your case in Denmark.
Okay. Top.
Ja. Var det en... Du har en kopi der, eller?
Det er en kopi.
Okay, du har den.
Mm.
Godt. Alright, any questions?
I'm without any questions.
And these back also. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You made a copy for your case. Okay, then we're done.
Alright.
Så har vi jo sådan en regel om, at når man ikke har fået frokostpause,
Mm.
ligger man